Love is the ground Love is the ground on which we lay. That seems so perfect for our evening tonight. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mackenzie Wren. I'm the Special Projects Manager with Sojourn, the Southern Jewish Resource Network for Gender and Sexual Diversity. And we are the South's premier resource for welcoming and inclusion for LGBTQ folks across the South. We say that we work both for us and also to educate the communities about us. So there's that need of how we support each other and work across the Jewish community to create spaces that are welcoming. And tonight, in this Love is the Ground on which we lay, how perfect, we are so excited to talk to two sets of grandparents and grandchildren. To be quite transparent, we are waiting for one of the grandchildren to arrive. So we are going to take our time and begin our introductions. And then when Perry shows up, we will bring them in. But so I first want to begin to introduce the folks who I will be talking about. And Rebecca, if you can put on a spotlight for those folks while I am introducing them. And I'm going to start with Joanne Riker. So Joanne is a longtime Atlanta resident, has had a diverse career in publishing, technology, and ultimately nursing, caring for critically ill patients during the AIDS crisis, and later at Emory's Winship Cancer Center. She and her husband of nearly 55 years enjoy time with their 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren, traveling the world and staying deeply involved in their life. And I would like to introduce you to Eli Lubell, who is Joanne's grandchild. And Eli Lubell is a queer Jewish student from Atlanta who's now in Colorado, began at NCAA Division I diver before becoming a cliff diver, and is studying hospitality management at the University of Denver. And his experiences from Thailand to Casa Bonita reflect his passion for performance, community building, and mentorship rooted in resilience and identity. Welcome, Eli. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you.
So excited, of course, to also introduce Sherry Frank, who is a veteran civil rights and interfaith leader who served 25 years as Southeast Director of the AJC and helped found key organizations like the Atlanta Black Jewish Coalition and Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta. Her lifelong activism, chronicled in her memoir, A Passion to Serve, has earned her numerous honors and board roles in both local and national Jewish civic organizations. And here is Perry, right on time. Beautiful. So we are so excited to welcome Perry. And Perry Barnard, and actually, is it Barnard or Bernard? So you can correct me.
Yes, it's Barnard.
Barnard is a 23-year-old non-binary trans man and Starbucks shift supervisor with a passion for specialty coffee, cosplay, and costume design. Through over a decade of attending comic conventions across the US and abroad, he's found community, self-expression, and pride in his queer identity. So welcome, Perry. I understand you are also are you getting keyed up for MomoCon? Is that where you are?
Yes. We had some delays, so thank you for your patience.
No worry, you are right on time. So these 4 beautiful people are family. Two people are each families. And this evening we're having an intergenerational dialogue. So as the special projects manager for Sojourn, I talk to a lot of seniors, and seniors very oftentimes want to understand their grandchildren in particular, and oftentimes don't have the language or the experience because the field of gender and sexual diversity has changed so much. And even things that were the things for people my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, were just simply not present. And so the older generation has had to learn completely new ways of thinking and being in order to learn the experiences of their grandchildren. And it's not always easy, right? And it's not always easy for the grandchildren to understand and be flexible and to support that learning as they're on their own journeys. So tonight we thought we would bring lived experiences and have grandchildren and grandparents talk to each other about what was some of the journey like, what were some of both the places of support, some of the difficulty, and what are some of the recommendations that you might have from your experiences going forward. So I think from that, what I would love to do is have Eli and Joanne talk a little bit first, and maybe just like to the extent that you want to share your coming out story, right? That it's sharing that process of coming out to your bubby, and what was that like, and what were some of the conversations? And we'll just hear from both of y'all for a minute or two each, and then we'll bring Sherry and Perry in. And I love it that it rhymes. That's adorable. And then we'll begin kind of an open dialogue. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Right. So Eli, you want to, and Eli also, I will say, is one of our, what was when as a much younger person, was one of our under 21 awardees. So we've had a long and loving relationship with Eli. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, so nice to see you too. Very happy to be here with Sojourn and with all you today. Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of a brief, rundown of kind of my story. I came out pretty young. I came out publicly, I think I was 13, seventh grade. It was right before my bar mitzvah, actually. So that is how I know. Um, but for me, it was a pretty public experience because at the time I was really into athletics as a gymnast, and I was really involved in my school through a bunch of different organizations and some more artistic outlets that way. And so, I was really lucky because, and my bubby can talk about, when I came out to her, but I had come out to my family, in different capacities and had always been very supported. So knowing that I had that safety net at home when things at school were not really going well for me socially in that regard, like I really wanted to take that power back. And so that was kind of what prompted me to be more public about my sexuality. And yeah, so around the end of seventh grade, right before my bar mitzvah, I came out and as Jewish mothers on Facebook do, share lots of things. All of a sudden, everybody, everywhere, all at once seemed to know. And so yeah, I kind of went from 0 to 60 really fast. And yeah, that was some of my experience.
Great. Thank you, Eli. So, Joanne, do you want to briefly share for you when Eli came out, and what your reaction was, or
Well,
we'll just do
at
shorter
that
stories now, and then we'll get into longer stories.
at that time, Eli was going to gymnastics practice 3-4 days a week, and a couple of these nights it was pretty far out, and so I would drive him out there, wait for him. We'd go have some dinner, and then we would drive home 10 o'clock at night. And we would have some pretty serious conversations. And one night he said to me, "Bubby, I got to tell you something. You're going to be upset with me." And he goes round and round. And finally I said, "Eli, all right, enough already. Just tell me." And he said, "Bubby, I'm gay." And he said, "I know you're going to be upset about that." At which point I went across 3 lanes of traffic in a hard right turn, jumped a curb into a parking lot, threw the car into park, and almost put Eli through the windshield. And my response to him was, "Eli, unless you tell me you're an axe murderer, I'm going to love you no matter what. If you're gay, that's fine with me. I just want you to be happy and to be yourself." And then I put my foot in it.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't also add that the exact words that she said were, "I don't care who you bring home as long as they're Jewish." So
yes, I
did.
Yes, I did. And then I put my foot in it and I said, "I'm sure you feel very strongly about this, but you are only 13 and you have a lot of life to experience and a lot of things that are going to come your way. And I would ask you to keep an open mind. And let's not make any solid forever declarations right now. Let's wait and see how it goes. But if that's where you end up, it's fine with me." And a year later, I apologized and said, "I should have never told you that. I just should have said, we're fine with it. I just want you to be happy and healthy." And I never should have told him to wait and see. And based on that conversation, we were getting ready for his bar mitzvah, and we had started a tradition of always taking the children on a trip for their bar bat mitzvah, that they had to help plan. Eli picked Los Angeles because he was very into theater then. And I threw in San Francisco with the caveat that we go spend a day in Haight-Ashbury and the Castro, which was in 2017 was a very public newsworthy section of San Francisco, a very dynamic LGBT community. And that's what we did. We spent the whole day out there.
Okay, thank you, Eli and Joanne, for starting us off there, and we'll come back to you all, of course. And Perry, would you be willing to share your journey with us?
Yeah, of course. So I also had a very similar kind of coming out. I must have been somewhere around 13, but it wasn't I'm who I am. It was definitely a discovery process. And I attribute a lot of that to the community that I'm in with like the cosplay community. I think that it gave me an opportunity to explore my gender expression without these kind of labels tied to it. So I could dress up as like a man and kind of feel how that felt without, you know, making that a part of myself yet. And also be surrounded by a lot of other like-minded people figuring themselves out. And so I definitely poured a lot of energy and time into that part of my life because there were people that understood me. And when it did kind of come time to talk to my family about it, with things like cutting my hair or I don't know, just kind of the pronouns and things like that, I started with my immediate family, and I really don't know from there how it got out. Kind of like Eli said, you tell one person, and the community, like the Jewish community, is so interconnected that everyone ends up finding out one way or another. Um, and so I'm really curious to kind of talk about that and see how it was for my bubby, kind of talking to like extended family and having those conversations, because at the time when I was 13, I wasn't a part of that conversation. It was just kind of something I might hear like, well, how do you want me to explain it to our family? Or like, what should I say? Because all of these people knew you when you were a baby. It's like, oh, such a cute girl you have, or like excited to go to your bat mitzvah. So one way or another, they're gonna know you're trans, but kind of having that conversation wasn't something that I really had to do myself. It was something that my family did on behalf of me.
Nice. Thanks, Perry. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sherry.
So I would say my I guess I heard from Perry's parents that he was taking hormones and that he was leaning towards trans, and we never had a real coming out, a real discussion. I think it was just a quiet acceptance. I mean, I love to take my grandkids shopping, and I just said to Perry, go look in the men's department, because that's, the girls were in the girls department. He was looking in the men's department. And I rang up the clothes that each kid wanted without much discussion. I think the most conversation we had that I was most confused with was language, because Perry would often say, we had a good time, or they're coming, and that the we or the they were plural, but just for Perry. And I guess that was my own lack of understanding of language. But we never really had any kind of deep conversation. It was just kind of a quiet acceptance. And I think my quiet acceptance was modeled by his own parents' acceptance and his siblings' devotion. I mean, these four kids are so close to each other that I just think their sexual identity doesn't play a role unless, Perry, tell me if I'm,
No,
just seeing
I
it through
completely think
rose-colored
you're right.
glasses.
I honestly, you saying that has brought up like a lot of memories. I remember when our Uncle Jake had come to visit, he and I and one of our other extended like second cousin or something, we had gone shopping and gone in the men's section maybe when I was 15 or 16. And that was like a really big moment for me. And I didn't start hormones until I was 17. So at that point, people have already seen I had cut my hair. I'd cut my hair and was wearing more androgynous clothing. It really was just kind of this smooth transition for me, and I think the family, maybe not smooth so much, but there wasn't any big sit down conversation. It was kind of just like little moments.
So one of the things I'm curious about, particularly for the bubbies, and I love it that you both use bubby. That's so sweet. Language is changing, right? And language is the ways that people describe their gender or their sexual orientation, and the words that are used to describe that. How have you worked with that expanded understanding and to use and to like to understand, for example, how Perry describes himself, right? And using they and like just be working to understand the language that is in use now.
Well, I'll jump in with that. First of all, I still can't understand the pronoun business. I mean, I really will show my stupidity, but I guess the first time I went to something and they said on your name tag, put your pronoun, and I put MS. I mean, it didn't even dawn on me that it was, a pronoun. It's just, my being single. Uh, but but it's interesting because I'm an active feminist and have been very involved in the access to abortion issue. There's so much that's being pushed to say the word abortion and not have it kind of as a hidden word. I've taken that with trans. I often will just refer to my grandkids as I have a trans grandkid as this part of the identity and part of the fact that I'm not afraid to say it or embarrassed by it or any way. And I guess that's just part of my own advocacy. I say it just so often, so number one, people will know and accept it and know that I love my grandson like I love the rest of my grandsons and granddaughters. But also, it allows people to come and tell me they're dealing with sexual differences, and I welcome that conversation.
Yeah, Joanne, how about for you?
Well, I haven't run into it too much. Eli has always gone by he or him. When I've been in a situation with someone that maybe I'm not sure of, I'm not known for being shy, and so I just come out and ask, how would you like me to refer to you? And most people, the few times I've run into that, they've appreciated the courtesy. I try not to make assumptions. And so I'd rather embarrass myself by asking than to assume anything. And
So,
in the family, going back to what you were saying about in the family, we have a very small family. And the only people in the family who weren't here when this was going on was Eli's mother's sister, our other daughter. And I guess he told her on the phone because they knew, and there was just never a lot of discussion about it. This is what is. We love him. How can we help him? And we just went on from there.
I think the tutus and the glitter did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Yeah.
No, it was the drag shows.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went to a drag show that he was doing, and he came up and spoke to me, and I didn't recognize him.
amazing.
That's how it goes.
That's great. So, Eli, why don't you take this one first and then toss it over to Perry. As you were navigating your own identity and also having to educate your elders, what was helpful? Let's start with that question. What was helpful?
Well, I think just being open with them, I think was the most helpful thing. Like, I remember at the time it being very uncomfortable when other people brought up that subject to me. Like, I remember very vividly that when I wasn't the one starting the conversation, it kind of would make me uncomfortable. And I can't really speak to everybody's experience on that. I just know for me, that's how it felt. And so to be able to have those conversations, I think just always sort of made me feel safer to know that they were always there to listen and to know that there wasn't really anything off limits to talk about.
Yeah. I also heard within that, though, is that you were, as you said, 0 to 60 and outed very publicly in a way, and thus it was not necessarily your choice as to how and when to share it, right? And so you want to touch on that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like people are going to be how they are, and people will say what they're going to say, and you can't always control how that's going to go down. And so I think from a pretty young age, I sort of learned to become comfortable with that. And the more conversations that I had, I realized that in my head it was a lot scarier than the actual conversations were. I realized that when I would actually engage with people, and I'm sure Perry can relate to this on some level, like when you actually start having a conversation with somebody, even if they don't really see you or they're not trying to see you, the humanity of it comes through. And so again, I think just being able to connect with, my grandparents and my family and be able to say like, I'm gay and start that conversation or say I'm doing drag or do any of those things. And I remember it made me feel very safe and it made me feel very comfortable to explore.
Perry, you want to take that?
No, I completely agree. I had a very similar experience. I think that there is, how would I put it? When I was younger, I think having those conversations being brought up to me or questions being asked, there was that kind of like, oh no, this again. So I'm a little bit grateful that I didn't have to come out to everyone in my family, that it was kind of just something that was people were informed of and it didn't get brought up too much. Now I have the privilege of passing as biologically male. And so it really isn't something where I have to come out to people as trans. It's honestly the reverse, where I'm having to tell people, oh, I am trans actually. And I think that now being trans isn't so much of like, I'm not Perry, a trans man, I'm just Perry. And so it's kind of a change, like a difference where I felt like I needed to explain myself to everyone around me versus now,
So
I
Perry,
think, hmm?
go ahead.
You had asked what would I have appreciated? Um,
Or rather, what was helpful at the time?
what was helpful? Um, I think there is a fear of being involved in those conversations, and having to kind of advocate for oneself. But I also think like being a part of the conversation is important. Um, because like my bubby said, she didn't really know about pronouns or what pronouns I even used. And I think that it's very quick to people are very quick to be like, oh, you're trans, so he, him, but I use he, they pronouns. And so being in that room and being able to explain to people kind of how to use those pronouns and things like that, it's interesting because it's both at that age, I didn't want the responsibility of being the person to explain, but also there was no one else that had all that information to be able to teach. So I think I'm kind of split on it. I don't know what I would have wanted instead, but I'm happy with how things played out in the end.
Yeah, thanks, Perry. I want to follow up on something that you said too, which is now you pass, and is it other people's um, right to describe you as trans as opposed to just Perry, right? And so I'm like, I think these ways of how do we hold aspects, like when is it relevant to know that you're Perry the trans man versus you're Perry, right? And how do you own and decide, like, is it do you prefer to keep that private? And this is like a question for, as we navigate with families, as we share our experiences, when is it like, no, it's a matter of fact kind of thing, and you'd prefer that it not just be shared widely, it's your story to tell versus anybody in the family's story to tell. And that we'll come back to you, Eli, for this as well, because it's like, whose story is it to tell? And I'm curious from your perspective as a trans person, especially in an unsafe political climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially with what you added at the end there with the political climate, it's really scary to be trans right now. And I don't really think of myself as like a trans activist. I just think of myself as a person who is trans. I have a lot of information and know the terms to use and this and that, but I'm not standing on a stage aside from this, talking about trans rights. So it's not something that I seek out, and I don't think it's something that I would put in like a bio outside of this kind of event. Um, I I think it is important to come out to everyone in your family, but beyond that, especially now as someone that passes, I don't feel the need to unless it's a friend that I share with or a partner or someone that knew me maybe as a child and is confused. I think as an explanation, it's more important. But I don't have an issue with my bubby explaining to people that she's a proud parent of a trans grandchild. Um, but beyond that, you know, I would rather speak for myself and my experience than have someone try and explain what my gender looks like when they aren't the one experiencing it. And that goes beyond just like family, anyone really, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Love to hear any responses from Sherry or Joanne. Anything as you hear Eli and Perry share their stories, anything you're sitting with right now around their journeys or your own journeys with them?
You know, I'm just proud of Perry. I'm proud of his independence. I'm proud of his able to articulate his feelings. I was really thrilled that he was willing to do this with me. You know, I just love Perry like I love all my other grandkids, and I don't single him out in a different way because of his identity. I would say, yeah, he works more than some of my other kids, so I see him less, but you know, love him equally and you know, I think you feel, Perry, I think I speak for you when I say you feel totally included in every aspect of the family and the extended
Yeah.
family.
I
So
don't
it's
think
just
there's
normal. He's another one of my grandsons today.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything that the family does to make me feel excluded. If anything, it's something internal where I feel like a lot of the time because these people knew me like before transitioning as in like my family, right, it sometimes feels like a performance. I think as I've aged that's gone away, like kind of sitting at the same table uh with the family and having these interactions as time's gone on. But definitely when I was first figuring out my gender identity, figuring out my sexuality, it felt like being around extended family was almost like performance. And nothing from what anyone in the family did, but just kind of that dysphoria in myself and having like having people know me and for so long and watching me go through that change.
Joanne, I'm curious for you. You were a nurse, and you were a nurse during the AIDS crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And so, in the way of standing on love, right, was that something that you had to work through when Eli came out to you?
That when Eli came out, I had I think my biggest feeling was fear, that I was afraid of what he would run into from other people. I was afraid of how he might be hurt by how other people reacted to him. I was frightened for him. Um, but again, a lot of my fear was based on things in the 80s and 90s. And here we were in the, 2017. Um, maybe I'm just kind of oblivious, but other than that, it really didn't change anything about how we felt about him and how we conducted ourselves around him. I was always jealous that his taste in clothes was better than mine. He would take me shopping, and that he could do my makeup and I couldn't. He loved Sephora or Ulta, whatever it was. So,
Or both?
I feel like I'm kind of weird because we didn't have, or, his grandfather and I, it was just, that's Eli, that's who he is. And, people, I never will forget, somebody said, well, what are y'all doing this weekend? And I said, oh, we're going to Eli's drag show. And you should have seen the look on her face. But, it was no big deal to us. And I don't know if that makes us out of touch with reality or what, but you
I would say
know?
that it makes you the most in touch with reality and places that we wish more people would go in the world, right? Because that centering on love and that your grandchild is your grandchild, like that is the hope of the
Yeah.
that Sojourn works for at all the time is this should not be anything abnormal, right? It's
Well,
something very normal.
that's how we've always felt. And,
Yeah.
you know, he's had a couple of experiences with some significant others, and we've been very touched and honored that he introduced us to them. And, you know, we just, okay, I'm so glad he's got this.
Yeah, I will just like add on to that too. I think like looking back to that time period of, coming out, and I do remember there being things that were maybe unfamiliar for y'all. I mean, I
The
know
whole thing was unfamiliar.
my grandpa, I mean, for example, I know he's not here right now, but I mean, he's with us, but he's not in the call. But I
He's at dinner
remember,
with your brother.
yeah, I know. I remember like the whole drag thing being very foreign to him and just being very like there being plenty of kind of off the cuff comments of like, oh, well, you're not like into that, are you? Or that, that's not whatever. And, again, like the fact that maybe he did feel that way, or maybe, whatever preconceived notions he did or didn't have, when it came down to it and I was doing it, there was no question over whether or not they were going to support me at all. There was never any questioning, there was never any ridicule. It was, if anything, oh, sorry that I said that about that thing, or what. But I think, they always, 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 no matter what it was that I was doing, their priority was me and their priority was their love for me. And so I never really had to worry about, I was like, well, of course they're going to be in my drag show. Of course, of course.
Beautiful. So thinking about the Jewish community and resources for Sherry, and particularly Sherry, because I think gender identity is a thing that has been a newer thing for people to understand and having language to explore. And I actually just want to take one brief second for the good of the recording to really note that when we say LGBTQ, we're putting together both sexual orientation and gender identity, and those are two different things, right? So sexual orientation, the shorthand is sexual orientation, who you go to bed with, gender identity, who you go to bed as, and they are different, and thus there's different needs. So I, as a cisgender woman, right, have different needs than somebody who is a trans woman or a trans man, right? So transgender and cisgender talk about gender identity, and sexual orientation talks about romantic attraction. So wanted to just like do a brief teaching on that. And I'm curious, Sherry, in particular, as Perry worked through his identity, were there places where did you go for information, and how did you begin to expand your neural pathways to understand something that was fairly, unfamiliar from your lived experience?
That's a good question, but I don't have a good answer. I would say, as tied as I am to the Jewish community, I don't think I really went to the Jewish community to understand all of the differences. I think I just understood it through my own children. My oldest daughter, Jackie, was studying as an actuary, and her actuarial partners were often gay folks. And I think she really helped, this is back 30 years ago, really helped me understand and appreciate the whole expansion of identity issues, and just becoming friends with people that were gay. But and in terms of trans, I just think it's an evolution of acceptance and understanding that we've just talked about internally with the family. I don't think I've really gone to the Jewish community for resources, understanding. I think it's just kind of reading, learning, being aware, following news and societal changes.
Okay, so more like mainstream stuff rather than any kind of Jewish specific teachings or resources.
Oh, right. And Perry, you can speak for yourself, but I don't know that Perry's gone to the Jewish community for any of that acceptance or understanding, or I don't know that that's.
I mean, not through any specific resources, but I did go to Jewish day school, and I would say that the environment there was very inclusive. I didn't feel like I was ever being bullied for my gender or anything. And resources were accessible. I remember I was a part of our LGBTQ club in high school, and they at Weber, and they had organized a march at Pride. Like I believe through Sojourn and things like that. So there's a lot of resources around me as well as through my own communities with cosplay and things like that. I think the most really I did was educate. Um, like something I say a lot is people struggle with they them pronouns. And something I'll say is if someone lost a bag at the airport, you might take the bag and say, whose bag is this? Someone left their bag. It's something that's a part of our language and has been a part of our language for a long time. And I think the argument that, oh, well, it's not part of a part of the language, that's the example I use. And that's really the most education I'll give people aside from, you know, specific instances where they're asking me questions. But I think the Jewish community as a whole creates a space of inclusivity already, um, where questions are encouraged and people are happy to talk and share resources if needed.
And you mentioned the pride marches and things like that. Every synagogue that I've been a part of, any organization I've been a part of, has encouraged folks as often as we walk in the hunger walk to walk in the pride march. And I just think it's, as Perry well said, just an acceptance.
Eli, what about for your experience in your home synagogue, and and for both of you, for Joanne and Eli, is home synagogues? How were you received in synagogue?
Yeah, I think it was a similar experience to what Perry shared, where I wouldn't say that I went to my synagogue directly when looking for like answers about queerness, but with that being my community, especially coming out before my bar mitzvah, like I remember it sort of being in my head, like bar mitzvah being such a big moment for identity and personhood in the Jewish community. Like I remember thinking, like, I want to come out now so that I can enter the Jewish community as myself, as an adult, and so that I can see how people perceive me. Because, if I think my biggest fear was that I would enter the community as someone that I wasn't and be accepted as somebody that I wasn't. And so I really wanted to know, like, how is my community really going to accept me or not? And I just remember being really pleasantly surprised, I think, especially because, as Jews, yes, the Jewish community is very accepting, but we're also Jews in the South. And so that adds a layer onto it. And I just remember being shocked at how warm every single person at synagogue was to me. And I remember kind of it being a shift where I started to be more comfortable having other people talk about it, because I realized in that moment, like, that they weren't out to get me, that they did really love and accept me. And yeah, and I think that was definitely a big moment for me to then later on seek out resources from Sojourn and other organizations like it. But yeah, I think just having that acceptance sort of geared me towards the community rather than push me away from it.
I have a question for Eli. I know that he was very involved in setting up I'm sorry, Eli, the name of the organization just flew out of my head, at Pope. What was it called, remember?
Gay Straight Alliance.
Right, right. And he was very involved in that. And then unfortunately, after 2 years of Pope, we had COVID, and with, our concerns about the schools closed, not reopening, and he was going into his junior year, his mom made the decision to send him to Weber. And I know that one of his concerns of going to Weber was with the smaller population and what would he find there. He never said anything to me about the situation at Weber, and I'm curious as to what he found in that closed Jewish community of his peers.
Sure. Well, I mean, I will say, like, the Weber Jewish community was definitely different than the Jewish community I had grown up around. So definitely a different vibe. I think with Weber, what's interesting about it is that even in the Jewish community, I think it kind of just speaks to like our society and religion and how interwoven Christianity and Judeo-Christian values are kind of built into our society. But like, even if Weber wasn't, you know, the absolute warmest, most welcoming, environment, period, it was still accepting. It was still, I wasn't scared to go to school. Like, I knew on a baseline level, everyone here accepts me, even if they don't like me, and even if they don't like this thing about me, like, I'm still safe here.
Didn't you start a GSA there too?
Yeah, I'm interested, Perry, because you mentioned
Yeah,
the
my schooling is interesting. So for my freshman and first semester of sophomore year, I was at Weber, and I ended up actually leaving the school and graduating at a school in Roswell called Independence. So we probably missed each other
yeah,
there.
we did the reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. But I found that, it's high school. There's always going to be um, feelings around your peers in school, but I never really felt like I was being ostracized for my gender or anything. And there were a lot of teachers and resources that were just already available there, and other trans students that were there. So I didn't feel I came out around the time of my sophomore year. And aside from, I remember going into my sophomore year and the teachers were asking me what pronouns we all used. And I really appreciated that, because it was kind of like, I don't need to come out to each individual person. I can just kind of state it in the class.
So for Perry and Eli, oftentimes folks stumble with their language, right? Loved ones, strangers, whatever. People stumble with their language. And I'm going to come back to Sherry and Joanne with the kind of the same questions. But for both of you, when folks stumble with their language, how do you respond? What do you need? What's helpful at that moment when you know somebody loves you and they stumble with their language? What what can you share with us that is how that impacts you, and also like how you help people grow in their language without always having to be the people who are teaching everyone, if you will?
I have 4 children and 11 grandchildren, and my kids laugh all the time about how I'm calling everybody the wrong name. So, calling the he or she wrong is just kind of part of my, people just laugh and accept it. But I would say I probably referred to Perry as she more often than he for the first couple years. And I don't know, Perry, if you were insulted by it, but you always just accepted when I said, oh my God, I mean he or him, or I just never felt that I was being treated hostily, or that that people didn't understand she made a mistake, but she didn't mean anything by it.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I think that it's natural for us to make mistakes. I've made mistakes with my friends' pronouns. Even now, I think that it's normal. It's not the mistake that matters so much as the way you go about it. And so if you're going to dwell on it and apologize and feel like you've deeply insulted me, that's going to upset me more than just like, oh, I messed up, sorry, fix it and move on. I think it doesn't have to be as big of a deal as people feel like it is, because we're all understanding. It happens.
Eli or Joanne, you want to weigh in on any of this around when Joanne, when we spoke earlier, you said, oh man, I put my foot in it, and like there was, you don't have to tell the story, but when you mess up, right? And how do you keep on turning towards each other with love? Because I think that's so much of the question, is continuing to be in relationship with each other, even when perspectives are different. And so when you made a mistake, when you said you put your foot in it, like how did you want to, I don't know, like what helped you turn back towards Eli? What did Eli do that helped you, for you all to stay in relationship, if you will?
Well, I just had to put on my big girl panties, excuse the expression, and apologize for what I had said the night he told me that he was gay. And I said, well, I think you should, maybe give it some time and think about it. And I just apologized and said, I shouldn't have said that to you, and I'm sorry. And he just kind of looked at me like, okay, anything else?
I mean, I didn't even think it was, I was surprised she was even apologizing because I was like, that wasn't too bad based off of other things I had heard, and I was like, I'll take that.
And
Um,
as far as I know, I don't think I put my foot in it any other time. If I did, I was not aware out of ignorance, and Eli very graciously never pointed it out to me. So
yeah,
probably more that than anything else.
I mean, I think the biggest, and I will say it's very different, I think, as a gay man rather than as somebody who's gender queer or non-binary. Like, I, for me, it's typically very clear to me when somebody's intention is to be hurtful rather than they actually made a mistake. And I mean, I know that me, like everybody else, we're all flawed people. None of us are going to be on it all the time. And so I think just being able to kind of differentiate between those moments so that you don't further ostracize somebody that was doing their best and screwed up. Because I think honestly, I have empathy for the fact that I think that's a very vulnerable position to be in, to be trying and to be making yourself, putting yourself out there and to not get it right all the time. So I think for me, like, well, for one, if there was ever a time that, a parent or a grandparent or anybody said something that didn't really sit well with me, like we would talk about it or it would really just come up naturally again. And also like in those moments where somebody did make a mistake, a lot of times for me, like that just show me that they were trying in a way. Like the fact that they even went there and had the conversation to begin with was like something that felt important to me. So, yeah, I think just knowing like the right moments to call somebody out rather than the right moment to call somebody in is kind of like a good differentiating factor.
Beautiful. There's a question that said, did either of you, Eli or Perry, go through a name change? And if you did do a name change, did you have a ceremony with rabbi or clergy? Did either of you?
So I did go through a name change. I have my name and gender marker legally changed. So I didn't do a ceremony with a rabbi. It was kind of during COVID, I believe, that I got my name changed. Maybe a little before COVID. But I never really did anything with any temple for that. I get my hormones, my HRT through QMed. And so my endocrinologist had a lot of resources to help me get my name changed and my gender marker changed. Perry was actually my middle name. And so I kept the M from my first name that I was born with, and I actually moved that to my middle name. And now my full name is Perry Micah Barnard, because I know that in Jewish culture, we're named after loved ones who have passed, and I really wanted to hold on to that name Perry. So that's my story.
Yeah, beautiful. So we're a few minutes in the beginning to wrap up, and I'm wondering, as you think about other grandparents and grandchildren who might be struggling, what messages would you give to them? Grandparents, let me hear from you. What messages would you give to folks who might be struggling with understanding?
I would say two things. They are your grandchildren or your children or whatever it is, and you love them. You love them for who they are or in spite of who they are, and to remember that they can't be what you want them to be all the time. They are their own selves, and you should love them and respect them for that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
No, that's really the answer. I give big props on that, right? Like that, what else is there to say? But it is important to say because sometimes people struggle, right? And they struggle with exactly what you just said. They struggle with the assumptions, they struggle with the expectation and like, wait, you're not who I think you are, and you're different than how I thought you should be. And now I don't know what to do. And what I heard you say is just keep on loving. You just love them. That's what you
Yeah,
love them.
like I told him that night, I almost threw him through the windshield. I love you no matter what you do in your social life. Your social life is not my business. I love you because I love you and everything else is part of who you are. I don't have to love each individual trait, but I love you for being you.
Yeah. Sherry, how about you?
Yeah, I would say ditto on that. I just treasure family. It's just one of my most important values is to love family. And I often say to my children and say to myself 100 times, I'm just the grandparent, not the parent. And generationally, people live different lives and have different choices they make. And I would say none of my children and none of my grandchildren do exactly the things that I do. And I certainly don't do things they do, but I do want to give them unconditional love. And I want them to give me space to try to understand them when things are a little bit foreign to me. I mean, people our age, have really had to come to terms with different lifestyles and what we grew up with in pretty sheltered lives. So I just want to keep on learning and keep on loving and keep on having my grandkids acceptance and accept them.
Yeah, beautiful. And I'll just drop in a tiny little teaching again, which is the numbers of both gay and lesbian and bisexual folks and trans folks. Those numbers have pretty much been consistent throughout time. It's about 10% of the population is gay or lesbian or bi, and about 0.2% is trans, which is about the same number as Jewish folks in the world, just which is an interesting little data point. And it's really just more people not having to hide as much. Right. So that's really what it is people being able to live their authentic selves and be true to who they are. And so that's what I always think that's interesting, is that it's not that the numbers have changed. It's that the world used to be a little bit more safer, or was coming to be a little bit more safer. And that's a whole nother conversation that I actually want to just note as something that right now, especially for trans folks, the number of bills around the South and that are targeting trans folks, and that it's really important to get involved, and that it is a strong Jewish value, not just a human value, to do advocacy. And we at Sojourn have opportunities to do that and to help support and protect trans rights. So I just wanted to make that little pitch. And then for Eli and Perry, for your closing, I want to, for folks who may not have as fabulous grandparents, or who may struggle with relationships with an older generation, is there anything that you would say to either to your peers or to the elder generation as to what, what would you say to them? How to help, I guess, what words of wisdom do each of you have? Eli, you want to take this first?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you a two-part answer. I think that really has to start with you. I think you really have to be able to love and accept yourself before you can, start worrying about who else is loving and accepting you. And I think that is just sort of a hard fact about life, like that you really just you can't control what other people are going to do. And so I think anytime that I've had somebody that's come to me and that they were struggling with their family or struggling with just things that they weren't fully in control of, I think it really does start with, make sure that you do find those people. If they're not your family members, you do find the people that see you as you want to be seen and love you and support you. And yeah, just be able to get to a point where you can look in the mirror and you feel great about who you are and you can love yourself. I think that is really just something that I live by and is most important. But then with family, I think, not kind of like you mentioned, I'm the exception, unfortunately. I'm the lucky one that my family has always loved and supported me so much. But coming from that place, if I could give people that are struggling any advice, I would say I think the coming out process is challenging for a lot of families because whereas you may have had the time to sit with that decision for years or however long and mull it over, and maybe it took you years and years and years to be able to say it out loud, you've already done that work. And so it can be really hard for people. I'm sure that Perry has experienced this, people that know you one way or that see you a certain way and expect you to be that way. It can be very jarring to go through that change. So I think I would encourage people to give their family members grace, but to also come to the table and reach out and try and find the balance of wanting to connect with your family and wanting to help them learn and all that, but also valuing first your well-being and making sure that you feel safe.
Great, thanks, Eli. Perry, we want to.
Yeah, I completely agree. You touched on a lot of points that I was thinking. I think a big one that I'd want to mention is for family, your trans family members are still, your family, just because they're changing their gender, they're still the same person. Take interest in their lives outside of just being trans, get to know about like the events that they're going to, their community. And that's really what's going to teach you more about who they are and their identity, is by going to the drag shows, listening to who their friends are, and all of those kinds of things, you don't have to understand and have all the words right. I don't think anyone expects people to. It's really about connecting with that person, with your family member. That's more important, outside of just, respecting their pronouns. That's what's going to make them feel accepted. And yeah, it's a process. It's not going to come instantly. Like Eli said, it comes from inside. Once you can do so much from the outside to make someone feel safe, but until they feel safe within themselves, there's always going to be a wall there. There's always going to be a divide. Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful to have had this hour with all four of you. Wonderful, loving people. What an honor to get to hear and share stories with you all. Again, we have resources. Rebecca just dropped some resources into the chat. And for those who are watching online, just visit our website at sojourngsd.org. And we are always here to support in any way. I have dropped an evaluation form in. We'd love to know how this program landed with you. And just once again, Joanne and Eli and Perry and Sherry, thank you for your time, your vulnerability, your willingness to show up, to share your love across the generations, and just rooting in that standing on love. So thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And thank you for giving me the hour with Eli, because he's so far away.
I feel the same with my grandson. Thanks.